Hello, and welcome to the Walking Digital Corridors podcast, where we explore the intersection of sales, personal growth, and walking digital corridors with confidence. I'm your host, Alex Abbott, otherwise known as the Bearded Sales Guy, and today we're delving into a critical yet often overlooked aspect of sales: mental health and holistic well-being. Our guest today is Jessica Chesterman. She has an exceptional background with over 15 years of experience in corporate sales. She understands the demands and pressures of working in high stakes environments. Now, as a therapist and a workshop leader, Jessica leverages her expertise in psychology and neurobiology. So I have to dig into that to help individuals and teams create healthier, more sustainable working lives. So, Jessica, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. That sounded really impressive.
Yeah, you like that?
Bit of an ego boost.
Well, it helps. It helps. So, look, let's kick things off. I'd love to learn a bit more about your journey because like me, you've spent a while in corporate sales.
Yeah.
And I have a passion for kind of supporting positive mental health in sales. So when I came across your profile and the work that you're doing, I thought it'd be great to come on the show. But tell us about this journey from sales to therapist.
Yeah, I know. It's not the natural sort of journey, I suppose, is it? Going from being in enterprise sales for however long and then turning into being a psychotherapist. I think for me, the background, so I always love this kind of world of mental health anyway. So it's something I always wanted to go into. But I think I've got a huge passion for trying to change the way mental health is viewed a bit in the corporate world. You know, we naturally have so many stresses that occur, and as we know with sales, when it's good, it's great,
Yes.
and when it's not so good, you know, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
um but when I was sort of in that corporate world and you looked at how mental health is sort of approached,
Yeah.
it tends to be like a bit more reactive, I suppose, like stress management techniques, which, although of course is absolutely valuable, it tends to overlook the interconnectedness of our professional lives and our personal lives and the overall impact this can have on our well-being.
Mm,
So when I sort of became a therapist, I thought, oh, imagine if we could just be a lot more proactive. And what I mean by that is all our behavior is driven by a root. And
mm,
if we can understand this in the context of our own lives, then we can move the narrative from, oh, I have to just find ways to manage my mental health, to
mm,
actually, I know how to help myself to thrive. Because, you know, when you're in the corporate world, when you're in sales, there are just naturally going to be those stresses. But if we build those strong foundations, which is what our emotional needs are, then that really supports us to be able to cope with those
mm.
stresses that come our way and deal with those things a lot more effectively.
Yeah, which are often forgotten. I had a manager years ago that used
Mm.
to use this term, which was everything's funny when you're making money. And it was so true in sales in my career. It seemed that you could deal with absolutely anything when you had a strong pipeline and the deals were coming in. Um,
Mhm.
for years, personally, I never really thought about, my mental well-being and being good to myself and having that as a core foundation. And I think that's true for many in sales.
All right, it's so important. And I think as well, when we're sort of on that conveyor belt, go, 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 and then we're not really giving our time to pause, stop, take a beat, be present, then we start to neglect the most basic things in our life, which actually add value to us. So I always talk to people about just recognize those basics. So, and this is something which managers should become cognizant of
Yeah.
as well. What I mean by the basics is, if you're someone who has always eaten really well and all of a sudden you're just eating really bad food or you're skipping meals, that's a
Yeah.
signal. If you're someone who's been able to fall asleep quite easily, now you're having trouble going to bed, having trouble waking up in the middle of the night, you've got all these thoughts going on, that's a signal. These are signals that something isn't working and the stresses are getting a bit too much.
Interesting. Just had a thought triggered. I had a Magnum ice cream at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, and I don't normally do that. And I'm just thinking to myself, was my stress level a bit too high?
Yeah, I mean, it is all signals, and a key one as well. So I work a lot with people with depression as a therapist, and one of the key indicators as well is sort of the withdrawal
Mhm.
from other people and connecting to other people. So you spend a bit more time being isolated. Byproduct of that is then you spend more time being maybe alone with your thoughts, which may not be unhealthy, and also thoughts which may be being driven by
Mm,
emotion rather than rational thoughts. So which aren't always a reflection of the reality. So there's all these type of behaviors which to be mindful of. And when I sort of say it's important for a manager to recognize that, because sometimes when managers are dealing with, the natural stresses, get those deals in Q3,
mm,
Q4, sometimes they can perceive when a team member sort of withdraws, or they may come across as not caring or being
mm,
lazy. Actually, again, that's the signal. If you've got someone in your team who is usually incredibly efficient, really hardworking, and all of a sudden they're, withdrawn, or they're not coming to you with their work, or they're not asking things
mm.
from you where they usually did, maybe something's not quite working. Maybe they're not managing the stresses in their
Yeah, yeah,
life.
and it's a really good point. I think we should come back to that in terms of whose responsibility is it, other than your own. But
Loaded question.
But before we
Yeah.
do, I'm just keen to understand, for you, what was there a turning point in your corporate career where you said, no, there has to be something better? You know, well, it's more, well-being of me and others is more important than selling.
Well, so I suppose, I think when I look back and reflect, so in my mid-20s, I went through a horrific bout of
Mm,
depression. It was a couple of years
right.
long, and this is why I think the psychotherapy I do really, really resonated, because when I look back, so much of how I was living my life was entrenched in this therapeutic
Mm,
theory. Um, but yeah, I mean, I had personal challenges, and it absolutely bled into my work
yeah.
life. But the challenges I was having wasn't at work. And this is why I think it's so important to be aware of the interconnectedness of our professional personal lives.
Yeah.
So the challenges in my personal life made me withdraw a bit from work. I stopped asking for help. My perceptions of people around me, I went from being this top performer, literally in every sales job I had, to find it really difficult to get my
Mm,
numbers, to make those new business development calls. So my competency was massively being
mm,
impacted. I started to perceive that the organization didn't value me. I withdraw, so I wasn't, spending time with my manager on those one-to-ones, the person who really gives you sort of
yeah.
validation, makes you feel like, that you're achieving stuff and makes you feel seen. So I think it made me think, is, is this working for
Yeah.
me? But to be honest, it wasn't until a long time
Mm,
after where I thought, okay, this is why my my work life wasn't working for
yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah, indeed. So I guess this brings us on to really understanding those stresses, those sales stresses, and you've spoken, and we've talked a few times before this actual podcast, but you've touched on the mental health challenges people are facing in sales teams. But from your perspective, what's really driving the issues? You've touched on the personal side. It could be the personal life, it could be at work, but from your perspective, what's really driving the issues?
Yeah, so I mean, the angle I take, I suppose, is we all have essential emotional needs which drives all our behavior, and we have physical needs as well. And it's when these needs are not being met in balanced and healthy ways, that's when sort of mental distress or depression, anxiety, addiction, overwhelm, they can start to take hold. So it's being able to identify that within your work pattern or within your home life. So, for example, we have status drives a huge amount of behaviors in the workplace. So our emotional need for status is about being valued and respected for a role that you perceive to have importance in your life. So, you know, as a woman, I carry many of those hats. It could be as a mummy, as a worker, as a mentor, as a partner, and so forth. When you're going through challenging times within the workplace, within sales, and you've been someone who has been hitting their numbers and you're getting a lot of recognition, validation for that, well done you know, talk to the company about what you've done, but you've really moved into a place where that isn't happening, all of a sudden that becomes an unfamiliar feeling, and you can start to feel like you're not being recognized. Am I getting value? And that can really start to then impact your perceptions of the workplace and the situations around you. So, for example, it's at this time where sort of the attention that you get from your manager is so incredibly important, because if you don't feel valued, if you don't feel recognized, if you don't feel seen, if your perception is you're not performing that the way you want to, and your manager sort of comes up to you and goes, Jessica, can we talk about what could have been different in that deal? If you don't feel valued, your perception of that comment may be, I feel criticized, I feel scrutinized, I don't feel safe, I don't feel comfortable with this. Whereas if like your status is being met, you might be like, great, this is going to be constructive criticism. I feel seen, this is going to support me, this is going to add value. So it's not, I suppose mental health is very, very nuanced, and there's lots of things which contribute to our behavior, which adds and amplifies the stress. So like I alluded to before, when you have all these sort of emotional needs being met, it builds the foundation. So when you have the unpredictable cycle of sales and the nuances of being in sales, you can sort of manage them a lot more effectively. And you can also be able to step back and be more rational. So when things aren't working, it can be very easy to start thinking with your emotional brain, where you're sort of quick to respond, quick to judge. Or this can impact like your thinking style, where if you're already in sort of a vulnerable mental place, or you may be dealing with anxiety or depression, your thinking style can maybe move to be a bit more catastrophic. Well, that hasn't happened because of me. Well, that hasn't happened, so everything is going to go wrong in my sales cycle. That hasn't happened, so all my deals are going to be, you know, screwed. And then that can massively impact then how you respond to your clients or to your pipeline, or look at your goals or whatever moving forward. So it's all very interconnected.
Wow, it is. And not everybody has the benefit of being in a, let's say, you know, a stable family environment, upbringing, where these things that you talk about, these basic needs, have been sort of, you know, wired into somebody.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think that's what I'm really, really passionate about, because so with the sort of workshops that I do, in my client work, I have a therapeutic measures form where people who come in, they sort of scale themselves, right? Of how these needs are being met across their lives, or how they may be using some of their, you know, cognitions, which could be exacerbating some of their issues or thinking styles. And I've adapted this for the workplace. So when I go in, people can really take a step back, and you get a lot of those aha moments of, yeah, that's how I'm living my life. Or actually, if I change that, that would make a huge difference. Or no, I'm not seeking out enough privacy whatsoever. So as soon as I finish in my sales job, yes, I come home and I'm on my laptop, or I'm into like the bed bath routine. I'm not taking any time out. My goodness, no wonder I feel totally overwhelmed. Really shine a light on things that, okay, if I change that, that will make a difference, and that will actually make me feel more prepared or to cope, or it brings an awareness to, well, actually, if I'm objective to that situation, that wasn't what my manager was trying to say. That actually will be helpful for me.
And I guess that's really honing into kind of the root cause of what might be amplifying their emotion in a certain situation where, if that basic need was met, or at
Mm.
least they were more aware of why they might
Mhm.
react in that way, then they can
Yeah.
consciously react in a way that is, okay, let me take a minute, let me think about this.
Well, yeah, and I think you become a bit more mindful of the changes or the tweaks in your own life you can make so you can live a life that works better for
Yeah,
you as well.
yeah,
I mean, there's just loads of research done around how important it is to get these needs met, and we hear about them all the time. Like if you listen to podcasts, you always hear about need for meaning, need for positive attention. From the moment we're born, we seek out meaningful relationships and the importance that has, because without it, it's so easy to feel isolated, to feel alone, to feel like you don't matter, to feel like you don't have a place in the
mm,
world. Um, so they're all important to be met, and just having one massively met out of balance, such as
mm,
status in areas of your life, can have a huge
yeah,
impact. Huge
yeah.
impact.
I've spent 20 plus years in the corporate world. I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like what you're talking about. In fact, the topic itself, mental health, is, I think, still quite
Mhm.
taboo in the workplace. It's, you kind of see companies trying to lean into it, but feeling a little bit scared about the topic for various reasons. And
Yeah, yeah, I get that.
wellness days or days off aren't really cutting it, in terms of companies saying we're doing stuff to support the mental health of our employees.
Yeah, yeah, and I think they've, corporations, if we're honest, of course they have a tricky
Mm,
job because when people are feeling low or stressed, there will be a different reason as to why people are feeling the way that they
mm,
do. And there are so many nuances when it comes to people's mental health. And I think that's why moving to from a reactive, well, let's just, help you manage stress. Well, if you don't fully understand what the triggers are for your
mm,
stress, or what is contributing to feeling the way that you do, it's almost like you're putting a plaster on a broken leg,
mm,
really. So our emotional needs are, they're innate, they're
mm,
biological. So if you can identify how these needs are met, then that can really help to support you moving
mm,
forward, and really be able to make changes in your life, not just now, but
mm.
forevermore. And it will help you so you find it easier to be able to deal with stressful situations, challenges in your personal and professional
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. And so the work that you do really gets to the crux
Mm.
of, I don't know, I don't want to say the
Yeah,
problem,
no,
but help.
yeah, no, absolutely, of course. So, and then obviously, you've got the sort of cognitive elements as well, helping people with their thinking styles or having an awareness to, how their thinking styles may be exacerbating some of the problems. When you're in a state of elevated emotions, you lose the ability to be
Mm,
objective to your current situation. So I think that's why the sort of the scaling that we do across all these needs, your emotional, physical needs, and your cognitive distortions, it massively shines a light on, okay, well, I do that. And and also as well, before I do the workshops, I give people the opportunity to anonymously, request, could you talk about this and weave this into your talk?
nice.
So, for example, it's very common for people in sales, ironically, to have quite self-blaming kind of behavior.
Yeah,
How do I deal with that? So obviously you're not doing a therapy session to get really, really into the root, but it's how can you give, people tips and hints that they can sort of take away and use in their day-to-day, which will massively, massively
yeah,
help them.
yeah, yeah. Now, there's often a question that comes up when I'm talking to perhaps more junior salespeople, which is
Mhm.
sales for me? And actually, I've probably asked myself that question more recently than when I was
Yeah.
a junior salesperson. But what I'm trying to do is link this point here with one question I've got for you around the role of cognitive distortions
Mhm.
in salespeople perceiving their performance and the challenges that they're under. And so,
Mhm.
and so, would you say that's a cognitive distortion, them actually questioning whether or not sales is right for them because of the emotion attached to that and not being given the guidance to actually learn how to sell effectively? Or is it two completely different things?
Well, I think, having the question in a way, it is different things, isn't it? We always question things that we're doing, but that comes to the self-belief element and also feeling secure within that environment. So it's not uncommon for people to fall into sales. I know I'm definitely someone who fell into that career for a long, long
Yeah.
time. But when I was doing the best, I would say, in my sales career was when I really had that feeling of
Mm,
security in my job. Because with that feeling of security, you become
mm,
brave. So you take the risks, you feel confident in your own competency to give things a
mm,
go, um, to get out your comfort zone. And there's all these things that then help you believe in yourself to think, no, I can
mm,
do this. It gives you that confidence. It's almost that feedback loop of, yeah, you can give this a go. And then when you're surrounded either with a community of people or a management team who
mm,
support that, and they focus on the good things that you're doing and pull you up, then that makes you believe more that, yeah, I can do this and this is the career for me. When things aren't going well, when you don't feel secure, when you're questioning yourself, when you don't feel competent, that starts to knock your sort of
mm,
self-belief. You then can then start to sort of blame yourself. Well, I'm the reason it's going
mm,
wrong, for example. And then of course you are probably going to question, can I
mm,
do this? Sales is very up and down as well. So managers and sort of the community around you need to support more of that growth mindset. We've In mental health, we can very much focus on what's not going right, what's not working. Um, but it's really taking well, look at your successes. What can we take
mm,
from that? If someone says to you, well, haven't done my number, haven't done it yet. What can we take from
mm,
this learning? And you're demonstrating where their strengths are. When you're in a funny place, you focus on the negatives all the
yeah,
time and you forget all the good things. What exactly did I have to do in order to achieve that last time? Right. So how can I do that this
yeah,
time? It's that reminder of, yeah, you do have
yeah,
skills.
yeah, yeah. So let's come back to something we touched on earlier about whose responsibility is it to sort of
Mhm.
recognize when these stressors, these signals are arriving. Now,
Yeah.
we could easily say, I'm sure, well, it's down to the individual, but like me eating the Magnum yesterday, often these things creep up on you. What What's
Mhm.
your view on, well, what tips can you give individuals initially to help them recognize these things? And then let's come on to management and their responsibility in this.
Yeah, so I mean, so it's basic self-care would be the
Yeah.
first one. So, we've got physical needs, which is, movement, sleep, eat,
Hmm.
drink, shelter, this kind of thing. So it's being cognizant of that and the changes within them, which could be a signal that, okay, maybe the stresses are getting too much. I think we have to be quite mindful of telling people, well, this is how you live your life. And if you don't, then you're not mentally healthy. Everyone has to do cold baths and everyone has to shut their email off at 5 o'clock and all this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Part of having a healthy approach to your mental health is recognizing what you need and what works for you, because we're all
Mm.
different. None of us the same. And this evolves as well. I had a very different working pattern in my
Yeah.
20s to now my 40s. So it is important to sort of recognize what what does actually work
Yeah.
for you. I think one thing I would really say which can help, which seems such a basic tip, is to remember that you can only be rational when you're
Right.
calm. So when we are existing in stressful
Yeah.
states, and our emotions are elevated, we stop thinking with the rational part of our brain, which is, problem solving, critical thinking,
Yeah.
reasoning. That's what it's responsible for. And imagine what would happen to an organization if everyone was just, making decisions on emotion and with their emotional
Yeah.
brain. So I always talk to people about doing calming techniques, which has a longer out breath. You've got the longer out breath is responsible for your body's relaxation response, so your parasympathetic nervous
Yeah.
system. So the longer out breaths will override the body's stress
Okay.
response with the shorter in
Nice.
breaths. If you do that, it will instantly lower the cortisol levels in your body, which is your stress hormone, and then you can sort of calm, and then you can approach situations a lot more rationally, methodically, and so forth. So
Nice.
it's a very basic tip, but it does
Yeah.
massively help. You're working with your body.
Yeah. And giving yourself the time to then think rationally. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there are just so many. So, when you're in stressful situations, try and take a step back. And if you're having sort of thoughts about things, are these thoughts
Mm.
true? Do I have evidence for these thoughts? When is a time that this situation could have been different? Or, it's good to sort of question yourself, because when you are existing in sort of overwhelm or high stress, then I think, like I mentioned before, you lose that ability to be objective to your situation.
Yeah. I know for myself, I'd rather say nothing and just hold back until I'm ready to process, what I've heard or a certain situation effectively.
Yeah.
But in my career, that's often been looked at as, well, why aren't you saying anything? Well,
No, but it's good to take a step back, isn't it? And really try and process your thoughts, your feelings, and then what you want to contribute and your
yeah,
viewpoint.
yeah, indeed. So on to the manager or the management and their
Mhm.
responsibility with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really tough one, because I think corporations do have a hard job, dealing with so many different people. Everyone has their own challenges, and as a business, you report to shareholders and all this kind of
Yeah.
stuff. I think what I would say is, I think it would be of value if managers were more equipped. I sort of saw a statistic the other day that I think over a third of managers do not feel equipped enough to deal with the evolving mental health challenges of their
Mhm.
team. And managers have a really
Yeah.
tricky job. They're sort of reporting up, they're reporting down, they're trying to bring the best out of their people. I think businesses would really benefit from nurturing the knowledge within their
Mm.
managers. Um, but when it comes to an individual level, people walk into a therapy room because they sort of want to take responsibility for their mental health, and they're there because they want to make changes in their own
Mhm.
life. So of course we absolutely have a part to play in that. Um, and again, I think that's why it's, if you give people the knowledge and skills they need to understand what changes they can make in the context of their own life, then that's going to be really, really valuable. But we all play a part, of course we do. Um, Businesses will benefit if they can get the most out of their
Mhm.
people. There are obvious benefits to that. And no one wants to really struggle with their mental
Mm.
health. It's not something we choose, but unfortunately, life throws so many things at us. So it's really being able to identify what are my key stresses, and if I can make what changes, this is the type of impact it would
Yeah.
have.
Yeah. So we've got a few minutes left. Let's sort of dig
Mhm.
into some of the work that you do, and the I made a note of it here. It's like a therapeutic method that you use. Uh,
Yeah, of course. So it's all aligned. So every human on this planet, the framework is every human on this planet is driven by 9 core emotional needs and our set of physical needs. When these needs are met in balanced and healthy ways, so they are meaning and purpose, security, privacy,
mhm.
community, autonomy, control, status, this kind of stuff. When they're met in balanced and healthy ways, life tends to work. It's when they're not, which when the problems arise. So the sort of the therapeutic form I use on my workshops, which I've adapted, is to really highlight how these needs are being met, not just in work, but in
Mhm.
home. So by the end of the session, people can look at that and go, right, that's a key stressor for me. I've only, on this scaling, I've only scaled at 3. So it's okay. So what would need to happen to get to a 4? What would that look like? What would be different? And so it can really guide people to making changes in their life quite quickly, which would positively impact them, which is the goal.
Yeah. And out of interest, is there a way to quantify the value of the work that you're doing in terms of improved performance, or is it not something that you dare to go near because this is just a basic fundamental that everyone should be cognizant of?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how I would quantify that completely, but I think for me, the goal is for people to have the knowledge and skills so they can then take ownership of that and make those changes. Because, you know, if you can make changes in your home life, and it will have a positive impact on your work life, and vice versa. But also as well, if you can identify some stresses at work, you know, and sort of you can then be proactive with making changes, and who do you need to make those changes with? Where do you need to get support from?
And your vision for kind of creating a healthier, more sustainable sales culture? I know it's not just salespeople you work with, but
no, I think this is the thing, because I'm a therapist, I don't want people to keep struggling. You know, and you look at some of the statistics around mental health in the workplace, and you're like, something just isn't working. And I'm a big believer in, this is going to sound incredibly corny, in sort of the power of knowledge. You know, if people can really get to sort of the root of what's going on and what's not working, then they can really make a change. It's not just a quick fix. This is looking at your life and identifying what needs to be different, so you can live a life which works for you a lot better.
Okay. And if there's just one key takeaway that you'd like our listeners to have from this conversation, what would it be?
I think it's it's a mental health challenge is always going to happen. But I think it's something you always need to invest in. Don't ignore the basics. That's incredibly important. If you notice changes in your behavior, recognize that that's a signal. It's a signal that the stress is getting too much and something needs to change. But also as well, like if you need support, it's fine. You know, so many people get support, and I think it's important to empower yourself. Sometimes therapy can be a really short-term process. But from a corporation perspective, I think by understanding needs, then you're getting to the root of some of the problems with your people. And then you're giving them knowledge so they can make changes in their personal and their professional life. And that's how we can really start making change in the workplace.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. It's been an awesome conversation. Thank you for sharing your insight, your experience, and how you can help people and organizations. So where can people find you if they want to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah, no, of course. So I've got obviously LinkedIn. We have to be on LinkedIn. Website, Therapy with Jessica. And I also have a YouTube channel, Therapy with Jessica again. And that's just when I'm sort of posting up information, mental health information to do with depression, anxiety, couples, all about the needs. So it's just a helpful bit of resource.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed it. Until next time on Walking Digital Corridors, have a wonderful rest of week, folks. Take care.
Thanks.